Family Police Department, Biggs.
Hello, this is Chris with CSX Railroad.
Yes.
Hey, we just got a report that we have a train stopped over near Central Parkway, right in between there across the Blanchard River.
Okay.
We got a report that we have a train stop right now because they see a naked female body laying in the middle of the track. Appears to be deceased.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. Today's case is a truly tragic one, and it was brought to me by my friend Chrissy, and I do believe that if Chrissy had never told me about this case, I would never have known about it. The research for this case was quite difficult as a lot of information sources have a lot of misleading information. There is also a documentary, which I believe is the reason why this case is as well known as it is. That being said, this case isn't actually that well known for how horrific it was. The documentary features interviews of people that were involved. It is a really good insight to people's characters and the case itself. However, I do believe it is very convoluted and the timeline keeps jumping around, so I couldn't make much sense of it, which is why I thought this is great to want to do my own research, because then I can actually find out exactly what happened. I also feel that in the documentary it was very focused on the Brooks family and it wasn't as focused on Vera Jo as it should have been. Vera Jo is the victim in today's case, and I just feel that within the documentary she should have been more prominent. Her story should have been told a little bit more. I just want to mention that this case gets really heavy really fast and it does not get better, so it's a pre-warning that this is quite a dark case. I also want to mention that every bit of information I found about the Brooks family is incredibly negative, and honestly, rightly so. But I did want to, in my own research, take out emotions and feelings and get to the true facts of this case. I would like to say though that it is impossible to not feel negatively to this family and their mother Cheri. So let's jump right in and get to today's case. Today's case is the killing of Vera Jo Reigle Messersmith. Just to add there, she is mostly known as Vera Jo Reigle, but in a lot of other sources she's known as Vera Jo Messersmith. So I've just put together both surnames because the Brooks family wanted her to be known as Vera Jo Reigle and her family and friends wanted her to be known as Vera Jo Messersmith. So I've just put it together to make it as accurate as I can, but in this case I will be either calling her Vera or Vera Jo. Vera Jo was born on July 11th, 1986. Her parents were Willard Reigle Jr. and Verna Gardner. She had two sisters, Allison and Ashley. Vera was born in Findlay, Ohio, and she was said to be a charismatic child who loved to be surrounded by people. She's also noted to be a very colourful person and loved wearing jewellery. Vera Jo could also be quite often found singing, as she absolutely loved this as one of her favourite pastimes, and her favourite genre of music was country music. Very sadly, Vera Jo did not have an ideal childhood, and there are multiple reports that Vera was actually sexually attacked by her own father when she was 11. There are also multiple reports that say that she was actually attacked much earlier than this too. Because of this, her father is now serving a 20-year sentence at Lima Allen's Correctional Institute. It wasn't just her home life that was difficult for her. Vera Jo is also said to have had the mental capacity of a 7 to 11-year-old, so it made schooling incredibly difficult for her. There's also a report that in 2005 she was shoved off her bicycle by a stranger, and it was such a severe accident that she ended up being hospitalised. She also suffered an attack where she was beaten so severely she was again hospitalised. The police did want to take action on this, but Vera Jo did not want to press charges. Despite a lot of bad in Vera's early years, this did not stop her from wanting to do the best she could. She knew that she had difficulties with her learning and keeping up with the other students, so she decided to take extra classes in maths and English. And in 2005, Vera graduated from Findlay High School. Vera did not get a job after school, but she did get checks from the government for her disabilities. Tragically, Vera Jo always seemed to be at the hands of sexual abuse. Even though her father went to prison for what he did to her, it is then said that her mother got with a new partner who also sexually abused Vera. It is horrible, it really is. This whole case is just devastating. Another person we need to talk about in this case is Cheri Brooks. We're just going to go into the background of some of the people in this case because when understanding this case in its entirety, it's very important to understand the Brooks family. Cheri Brooks was born on March the 11th, 1962. I tried really hard to find out more about Cheri's early life, but there wasn't too much to find. But there was one thing I did find, and that is that she's always been obsessed with baby girls, to the point that she would lie, and at the age of 16 she convinced her mum that she had been pregnant and had to give up her baby. Of course then her mum has gone to the state and tried to get this baby back, but it's actually then found that this was never Cheri's baby. Adding to the abuse of this case, At just 4 years old, Cheri was abused by her father. I hope you know when I mean abused, I mean sexually abused. I'm trying not to use those words together too much because YouTube does not like me saying it, but if I mention the word abuse and I don't say something like physical punching, fighting, etc., that is what I mean. But Cheri at 4 years old was abused by her father. Cheri was then taken out of the home by the state to avoid this, but it did not stop, and I cannot think of a better word here, so apologies for using this one, but it did not stop her relationship with her father. Cheri and her father's relationship did not stop once Cheri was in foster care. I just need to mention here that Cheri's mum did seem to know about this, and by all reports she was okay with it. It also states that Cheri's relationship with her dad continued when she married a man called Kevin. Kevin, Cheri, and Cheri's dad would live together, and I just could not believe this when I read this, but Kevin would be kicked out of the marital bed if Cheri's dad wanted to sleep with Cheri. So now we're skipping forward a bit because, like I say, there was very little to find on Cheri's early years. And Cheri goes on to have 9 children. The first 5 children that Cheri had were one by one taken away from her by the state due to a series of abuse. It is also mentioned that her first child was with her cousin. The state had to remove Cheri's daughter Maria when she was just 1 year old because of abuse. It is said that Cheri took this very, very badly, and after Maria was taken, she just pined for another baby girl. So Cheri did have another baby girl after Maria, and she named her baby Cheri. However, this baby never came home and was immediately put into the care system. Cheri never hid the abuse that she gave to her children. If another family member came in while she was attacking one of her children, she would just carry on. So she then gets married to the man that we mentioned earlier, Kevin, and with Kevin she has 4 more children. Her children were Kevin, but he's also known as Punky, and that's how we refer to him in this case, Chucky, Zachary, and Garth. None of these 4 children were taken away from Cheri and Kevin, and all of these children were boys, and of course Cheri still had an unruly desire to have a baby girl. Cheri's home was constantly documented to be vile. It was, according to research, a filthy, cluttered home for delinquents. A completely uncared for, vile-smelling home that resembled a sty. Cheri at some point developed type 2 diabetes, and this then put her in a wheelchair and gave her problems with her feet so she could not walk. Cheri was incredibly well known around Findlay, Ohio, and people referred to her as Charles Manson. Cheri was a dealer and sold methamphetamine as well as other substances. So Cheri is actually never referred to as Cheri, she's constantly referred to as Sugar Babe. And there is 2 conflicting articles as to why Cheri got the name Sugar Babe. There is one article that says that because she was selling meth, she was known as Sugar Babe for that reason, and there is another article that says she got this nickname from her father. Cheri actually says in the documentary that it is from her dad, but Cheri is known to lie, so I have no idea which one of those is true. After the state being on such high alert with Cheri's children, Cheri decided that the only way to get a baby girl was to have other women have babies for her. The other women that she chose were girlfriends of her sons. She would push the idea of those women getting pregnant and then giving Cheri their baby. Cheri would always hope that it was a little girl. When Vera was 19, she started dating one of the Brooks family sons, Zachary Brooks, who was only 13 years old. Now I know this is wrong and I'm not backing Vera at all, but do remember that Vera's mental capacity was 11 years old. I don't believe that if Vera was dating a man of 19, who was the same age as her, would have actually been right either, because Vera had a mental capacity of an 11-year-old child. I'm not saying that Vera Jo, when she was 19, dating a boy who was only 13 years old is correct, but I simply do not know what would have been right for Vera at that time. The relationship moved incredibly quickly, and very soon she was living with the Brooks family. I again found conflicting information that one suggested Vera moved in because Cheri kind of manipulated her to move in, then she started dating Zachary, and another article that said that she was dating Zachary before she moved in, but regardless, she ended up moving into the Brooks home and she was dating Zachary Brooks. Due to her own family treating her badly and her early years being filled with abuse, I do understand why Vera thought that this would be a good solution, even though it was said to be vile, disgusting, and a horrible home. Because also when Vera moved in, the Brooks family treated her with such love and kindness. Vera really thought that this would be the perfect move for her to finally be in a loving family. It started out that Sugar Babe would be so nice to Vera and treat her with the utmost love and kindness. She even said that she would help her cash her disability checks. So each time that Vera got a check from the government, Cheri would go and cash it. Cheri would also groom and manipulate Vera. She would make Vera feel that she truly loved her and was doing things out of love and kindness, but Cheri had an ulterior motive. I'll say it again, but Cheri was absolutely desperate for a little baby girl, and she then found a way to have one. She decided that the best person for this was Vera. So weirdly, when Maria was taken away from Cheri when she was 1 year old, Vera was about the same age. And even more strange, Vera and her family were living in the same apartment block as Cheri at the time. When Cheri's baby girl was taken away from her, Cheri actually approached Verna, Vera's mother, and asked if she could have the baby being Vera. Of course, Verna declined and said, "No, this is my baby, you can't have her." So then Cheri went on the hunt for another baby. So of course we know that she did have another baby girl, baby Cheri, but she didn't get to keep baby Cheri, and her next 4 children were boys. So we're now flashing back forward to when Vera Jo is dating Zachary, and Cheri manages, with enough convincing and manipulation, that Vera should get pregnant. So Vera did fall pregnant with Zachary's child, and as soon as she was pregnant, the torment and torture started. It was no longer a loving, hospitable environment for Vera, even though Vera was being mentally abused. This is when the physical violence and full mistreatment came full throttle. When Vera was living with the Brooks family, she was being made to be isolated from the outside world. If Vera went out to do chores, of which she had many, and someone came up and spoke to her like, "Hi, how are you doing? How's your day? How are you doing at home?" she would then put her hood up, say to them, "I can't speak to you," and run off. Vera knew that the Brooks family were constantly watching her. And Vera knew that if she ever spoke about the treatment within the Brooks' home or told anyone anything, Cheri would beat her. Vera was treated like a slave, and on top of that, she was made to sleep every single night with one of Cheri's pigs. The abuse was incredibly public. Again, Cheri did not hide this from anyone. And it was so public that other people within the town would call family services for Vera on Vera's behalf. The authorities would then show up at Cheri's house and ask to speak to Vera, but each time they did, Vera would just say, "It's lovely, I love being here," because again, she was so scared of Cheri that if she said anything, Cheri would beat her. Even before Vera gave birth, Cheri told people that she was having a little girl. And when I make emphasis on she, I mean Cheri was having a little girl. Cheri would go around and tell people, "I'm having a baby girl." When Vera gave birth, she did indeed give birth to a baby girl, and she named her Willadean. Willadean was born on November the 4th, 2009. If Vera tried to make any contact with her baby, pick her up when she was crying, or even just go and see her, Zachary would hit her. Cheri would tell everyone that Willadean was her baby, and if anyone turned around and said, "No, Vera was pregnant, it's Vera's baby," Cheri would aggressively tell them, "No, she's my baby, I adopted her." In the documentary, Cheri mentions that her birthday is November the 3rd and Willadean's birthday is November the 4th. The similarity in Cheri and Willadean's birthday is no coincidence, because Cheri wanted Vera to have early labour and give birth to Willadean on Cheri's birthday. Cheri would force Vera to drink castor oil and orange juice to induce the early labour. The recommended dose of this old wives' tale is 2 tablespoons of castor oil, but Cheri forced Vera to drink 3 bottles of castor oil. Because of this, Willadean was born 1 month premature, and she actually lived her first couple of weeks in intensive care with breathing issues and other complications. Having heard this in the documentary, I had no reason to think otherwise, that Cheri's birthday was indeed November the 3rd. However, when later on in research I was looking at legal documents for Cheri, it actually said that her birthday was in March. She is a known liar and is known to fabricate the truth, but what I didn't understand was, if her birthday was actually in March, why did she push for this premature birth so that her birthday would be in November? Personally, and I haven't heard this anywhere, but I just think Cheri wanted the baby as soon as she could get it. And so she forced castor oil down Vera's throat just so that she could have the baby 1 month earlier than when the baby was due. Officers went to the house at least 10 times in the 2 years. They were constantly called over a series of complaints of threats, child abuse, child neglect, and poor living conditions. Police also went there to escort a social worker to check in on Vera Jo and Willadean. Kevin, aka Punky, so the child, not the dad, was the eldest child of the remaining children that were in the Brooks' home, and it is said that he ran the household. It is said that Cheri and Kevin Sr. were terrified of Punky. It is also said that Punky was the leader of the Finley area Crips gang. All the boys in the household were members of the Crips. One night in August, Punky was walking with his girlfriend on a rural highway to go pick up some illegal substances for his girlfriend Heather when he was killed. A car driving along the road at the same time did not see the couple and managed to hit Punky, leading to his death. Punky died on August the 5th, 2010. Cheri could not accept that this was an accident, and because she only got a phone call about this 20 minutes after the incident, she believed that Heather, the girlfriend of Punky, was involved in the death of her son. Cheri claimed that Heather pushed Punky in front of this vehicle, and Cheri convinced a girl called Marcy to beat the hell out of Heather. So the rest of the family actually watch this. They actually watch Marcy beat the hell out of Heather, and they don't get involved, they don't stop it, they don't do anything. Heather is apparently on the floor and she's screaming, she's saying sorry and she's saying please help me and I didn't do it, but no one got involved, no one helped her. After this, Heather is severely injured from the beating. Punky wanted his brother Zachary to be able to fight like he could. Punky had always wanted Zachary to become the second leader of the Crips so they could run the town together. So when Punky died, Zachary became the leader of the Crips. And when Zachary became the leader of the Crips, this is when the mistreatment of Vera skyrocketed. Cheri could never bring herself to bury Punky's ashes, so instead she put him in a room and she put pictures around him and made it like a memorial. So family members and friends would bring things to this memorial in honour of Punky, and one day someone left a chocolate bar there. Now Vera, in extreme hunger, decided to eat this chocolate bar. When this was discovered, Zachary wanted to find the best person to attack Vera the worst. Zachary went down his phone contacts and found old girlfriends of Punky. He texted a girl called Crystal, and as soon as she got the message that someone had disrespected the memorial site of Punky, she rushed over. She immediately came in, found Vera, and started attacking her, and once she was on the ground, Zachary screamed at Crystal to punch her. And it wasn't just one punch. Once she had hit her, Zachary screams, "Do it again." This attack just continued until Vera was beaten black and blue. Another time mentioned was when Vera was asked to go and help clean out the rabbit cage. So Vera then is, trying to open the rabbit cage, and there's a bit of tarp on top, and the tarp is secured by 2 bricks. And so when Vera lifts this tarp, one of the bricks actually slides down and hits Cheri on the foot. In response to this, Cheri then screams. She's screaming so loud that everyone in the house can hear her, and Zachary rushes out and says, "What has happened?" Cheri then says to Zachary that Vera intentionally threw this at her feet. Cheri also said that Vera is not apologetic about this at all. She intentionally meant to do this. And now there isn't actually anything written down about what happened after this, but I can only presume that again, Vera was beaten. Because of this incident, Cheri and Zachary now discuss a way to get rid of Vera for good. 2 years before this, Cheri's nephew Travis actually got killed on the railway tracks. He was trapped in the middle of the railway when 2 trains came by, and he was trapped in the middle and lost his life. He was only 16 years old when this happened. This unfortunate death actually came back to Cheri and Zachary, and they started thinking that this was a perfect way to get rid of Vera. Cheri wanted to give Vera sleeping pills and Zachary wanted to drug her. They then thought that if they combine the sleeping pills with the drugs and just let Vera go off and walk, that eventually she'd find herself on the train tracks, she would fall down, and a train would come by and just take her life, and then there'll be no evidence because of the severity of that accident. They thought that this would be an ideal way to get rid of her because with no evidence, no one could identify Vera's body. On the week starting March the 21st, 2011, Danny Bixler had turned up to the Brooks' home with his girlfriend Nicole Peters. Danny Bixler was the cousin of the Brooks' family and he'd only been out of prison 3 weeks at this point. He had just been in prison serving a 3-year sentence. Cheri was pretty close to Danny. Considering his father was the first cousin with whom she'd had an incestuous relationship with, technically Danny and Cheri's son Scotty are half brothers, and their father is in prison for attempting to murder Danny's mum. So Danny was already a self-professed killer. He even had a teardrop tattoo on his face. His new girlfriend, 17-year-old Nicole Peters, was curious as to what it would feel like to kill someone. She also wanted a teardrop tattoo to match her boyfriend's. It seemed as if Cheri had struck gold, and these two were perfect for solving her Vera problem. Cheri told Danny and Nicole that the night in which Punky died, he wasn't walking with Heather, he was walking with Vera. And the reason as to why Punky died is because Vera pushed him in front of a car. She also then told them about the chocolate bar and how she was disrespectful to the memorial of Punky. Cheri told them that Vera had actually been abusing baby Willadean, and this is a story that we will come back to, but they were also told that Vera sprayed mace around the house and that actually caused Shannon to lose her baby. Cheri was stressing to Danny and Nicole that Vera needed to die for what she had done, and of course Danny and Nicole agreed. They weren't just in agreement with Cheri, they were ready and willing to kill her themselves. So going back to when Danny and Nicole have turned up at the Brooks' home and they've just heard this awful lie about Vera and what she was doing to Willadean, etc., and now they're very happy to be the ones to kill her, they then decide that in this week they're going to torture her the most severely that she has ever been tortured. There was one night when Chucky, one of Cheri's boys, decided to find his high school padlock for his locker and attach it to a belt and then hit Vera repeatedly. The rest of the family thought that this weapon was amazing and they all took turns to hit Vera as well. Danny and Nicole were prominent in the beating of Vera this night. They would either hit her with this belt or they would find a paddle and beat her with that. Sickeningly, Nicole was incredibly aroused by beating Vera, and the worse pain they put Vera in, the more Nicole enjoyed it. Danny and Nicole would take breaks from hitting Vera to go upstairs and have intercourse. As I say, the rest of the family would take turns with this padlock belt to hit Vera, but when that wasn't enough, they would also take turns in stomping on her head. Cheri would also tell Nicole that Vera had actually taken an interest in all of her sons and slept with all of them, and now her eyes were on Danny. Cheri really did convince Nicole that Vera was now after Danny, and she was saying that she wanted to sleep with him, which of course was not true. Just on the back of this, Vera had no interest in relationships of any kind. Once she had Willadean, the only focus in Vera's life was to look after and be the best mom she could of Willadean. Kevin, the dad of the Brooks' family, is just as much to blame as the rest of them. Kevin did actually take a back seat in the beating of Vera, but he knew everything that was happening all of the time. Kevin had actually served time in prison, but he didn't want to go back. So when the family had this idea of killing Vera, he said, "If you're going to kill her, wait till I'm back in prison so that I have an alibi." He knew that he was going to serve in prison for 30 days for a crime, so he thought that this would be his best out to not go back for more jail time if he was already in prison when the killing happened. This direct quote was given by Scotty, who is the eldest of all the children, and he said that this was the direct quote from Kevin. The beatings would always seem to take place in Cheri's bedroom. It was a bedroom filled with Chucky dolls, like Chucky from the horror film, those type of dolls. Cheri wouldn't let Willadean sleep anywhere but in her bedroom next to Cheri, so it is suspected that when all these gruesome attacks were happening, Willadean was watching her mum go through it. So Cheri actually wanted to get rid of Vera because Vera at one point said that she wanted to leave the Brooks' family home and leave with Willadean. Cheri thought that if Vera died, Zachary would then gain full custody over Willadean, and Zachary had no interest in being a dad, so Cheri knew that therefore she would then get Willadean. Cheri had already convinced Danny and Nicole to kill Vera, so she now knew that she had to create a cover story for the police. Cheri conjured up a story about Shannon Brooks. Shannon Brooks was the wife of one of Cheri's sons, Michael. Vera had actually looked at Shannon like a friend, and even though Shannon was still mistreating her, she wasn't mistreating her as badly as the rest of the family, and Vera had such a big heart that if anyone showed her kindness, she would accept them as a friend. So going back to what Cheri had told Nicole earlier, this was now a story that Vera had set off a pepper spray bottle on purpose, and it had filled the house, and this had then caused Shannon to miscarry. But Shannon later tells the police, the court, and the documentary team that she was never pregnant. Cheri thought of an idea that once the house was evacuated due to the pepper spray, Vera had actually run off with a boyfriend, and they had no idea where she was. She just disappeared. And on March the 26th, 2011, the Brooks family decided to carry out their murder plan. At 9:15 p.m, Zachary, Danny and Nicole told Vera that they were going for a walk and she had to come with them. Vera desperately didn't want to go, and she was kind of crying and pleading with, "Please don't make me go, I don't want to go with them," to the rest of the family. Zachary was screaming at her to put her shoes on, but Vera again was pleading that she did not want to go. Vera looked at Shannon for help, but help did not come. Vera then actually asked Scotty if he would come along, just because she cared for Scotty. She felt that Scotty was a friend, and if Shannon wouldn't come, Scotty was the next best person. And actually Scotty was like, "Yeah, I'm going to come with you," because he did not believe that they were actually going to kill Vera. So Scotty's room is upstairs, and he actually goes to get his shoes so he can go on this walk with them. But unfortunately on the stairs he's met with Zachary, and Zachary just stops him. Cheri was also in the house when this was going on, and she and the rest of the family just watched this all unfold in front of them. Vera then thought she has no other option but to put her shoes on, and just before she leaves, her final words, and it's believed her final words that she ever spoke, was "Goodnight Sugar Babe," in the direction of Cheri. The group walked to the train tracks, and once they were there, they stabbed Vera with a kitchen knife. Apparently before the walk, Danny was seen in the kitchen just playing with this kitchen knife and checking that it was sharp. But actually the kitchen knife was very blunt, and when they were stabbing Vera, it didn't actually go through her clothes. So they decided to strip Vera of her clothes so they could stab her better. It was later found that Nicole had the biggest part to play in the killing. Nicole was obsessed with the idea of killing someone, so this was her opportunity. It is also found that Nicole was incredibly excited by this, and she really wanted to go through with this plan. Once they had stabbed her a few times, Danny wanted to be sure that she would actually die, so he cut her throat. Once they finished their attacks, they left Vera on the train lines to ensure that she would die and her body would not be found, and they went home to celebrate. When they went back to the Brooks' home, they celebrated, they partied, they drank and they smoked, and they were really happy with each of their own involvement in this murder. Nicole is seen to be hugging people, high-fiving people, and taking selfies of herself smiling. It's also said that she kept telling people, "I've earned my first teardrop," which was in reference to Danny's teardrop tattoo. It is said that Zachary started to feel guilt and he couldn't enjoy the party, and he was seen smashing his head on walls and sitting alone in a corner and not really speaking to anyone. But no one was really bothered by this, and they all continued to party. There were other people at the party who had absolutely no idea what the celebration was for. They just went because it was a nice house party to have a bit of fun. They also thought that Nicole was lying. They thought that the events that people were talking about weren't real, so they felt a bit uncomfortable, but they didn't actually think that this was a true story. When they had run out of cigarettes, they decided to go to a local garage to obtain some more, but that's when they noticed a train had stopped on the tracks. Desc, a girl at the party, had actually asked the cashier, why would a train stop on the tracks at 3 a.m? And the cashier turned to her and said, "Well, actually they found a body." Desc then turned to Danny, and it was seen that he was in great shock and staring at his feet and looking really bewildered and a bit terrified, because he had thought that no one would be able to identify the body. When the group had left Vera, she was actually still alive. They thought that she would just simply bleed out or she would be killed by the next train that came by, so they just left her there. But they didn't anticipate that Vera, in her final moments of life, had mustered the courage and energy to pull herself in between the tracks onto the actual wooden bits of the train line and curl up in the fetal position. This meant that because she was in the fetal position beneath the train tracks, and she was so small because she was malnourished and tiny anyway, that the train would actually go straight across her. This meant that when Vera was found, the police could accurately identify how she was killed and that it wasn't an accident at all. The train conductor actually thought that he'd gone over a deer, so he'd stopped the train, but by this point Vera was underneath like the 7th or 8th carriage, so he'd gone back to look and then discovered it was the body of a young girl. So of course then he phoned the police, and the police then opened a police investigation. Police then questioned the Brooks family because they knew that Vera was living with them, and everyone told the same cover story. They all said that Vera ran away with her black boyfriend. This boyfriend was a fictional character just created for this story. Cheri realised later that she needed to change her story though, because she thought that this cover story wouldn't be enough. So she actually told the police that she knew nothing about Vera dying, and Shannon had actually come and spoken to her about it. Cheri also then said that Shannon knew everything about this gruesome attack, and that Shannon actually said she deserved it, and to not feel sorry for Vera. Cheri then also said that Shannon was happy that Vera died because she then wanted to take Willadean and raise her as her own. There was a lot of lies given in the testimony, but when the police did a thorough search of the home, they found Nicole's bloodied shirt, they found the belt, and they found a lock of Vera's hair. Video surveillance footage also shows Zachary, Danny and Nicole walking with Vera to the train tracks that night. In court, Shannon originally stuck to her story that was the false lie that Cheri had told everyone to tell. However, when the prosecution gave her a deal, she decided to tell the truth. Shannon could have actually got a 3-year sentence for obstructing the cause of justice, but because she made a deal with the prosecution, and her deal was to tell the truth so that everyone could find out the exact truth of what happened to Vera, she was only served with a probation sentence. Michael Brooks, Shannon's husband, actually was served with 30 days in jail and 5 years of probation. He was also not allowed to have any contact with Cheri or Zachary. Garth Brooks was served with obstructing justice, but he was only fined. Chucky Brooks was only 14 years old at the time. He was charged with obstructing justice, but he was already in a juvenile detention facility for unexcused absences from school. The judge sentenced him to complete a rehab program in a juvie institution out of state. Scotty Brooks was charged with obstructing justice because even though he actually didn't hurt Vera in any way, he knew everything that was going on. He knew that she was suffering and he did not stop it. He was sentenced with probation. Kevin Sr. was not charged. Zachary Brooks was charged with 2 counts of obstruction and served 2 years for each charge.
Are you asking today, Mr. Treese has proposed the recommendation, Mr. Doty, your counsel has concurred. Are you asking me to adopt the joint recommendation today and impose that as a sentence?
Yeah.
They were supposed to say 4 years, and then they were going to say, Zachary, we're taking it down to 6 months. But they screwed him over because they did him wrong. He's not even supposed to be charged with these.
I'm sorry, when you say he's not supposed to be charged, is there any particular, what are you referring to?
He wasn't involved. I don't understand it. Why did they say 4 years when he was promised that he only do 6 months?
Well, that was, since it was the joint agreement between the 2 attorneys, and your son, I wasn't sure, seemed to have agreed to it in court.
Zachary don't understand nothing.
Okay.
Zachary is mentally retarded.
Danny and Nicole confessed to the murder and were taken into custody. They told the police that Cheri was the one to give Vera drugs. They also said that Cheri was the one to force them to kill her. They also said that Cheri had given them instructions meticulously on how to kill her. Danny was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty. Nicole was sentenced to a 23-year sentence after pleading guilty.
Daniel Bixler, Shannon Brooks, Zachary Brooks, Garth Brooks, Cheri Brooks, and I agreed to kill Vera Jo Reigle on March 26, 2011. We agreed to do this because Shannon Brooks said Vera Jo Reigle caused her to miscarry. Zachary Brooks got a knife and gave it to Daniel Bixler. Daniel Bixler and I made Vera leave with us. We walked Vera to the railroad tracks where Daniel stabbed her several times. Afterward, Daniel and I agreed to throw the knife in the river. All of this happened in Findlay, Hancock County, Ohio. I know no amount of I'm sorry will justify or bring Vera back, but this is me making amends and taking responsibility for my actions, and again, I am truly sorry.
Cheri was served with obstructing justice and given 120 days in prison. Cheri was not charged with a crime in Vera Jo's murder.
I've been very depressed the last 7 months since Vera Jo's been gone. I'm very sorry for what my cousin did. It's been stressful to me. I miss her. That's it.
It was the Brooks plan and them to do all this, where's the charges? Why are they not in prison? Why are they not where Nikki and Danny are going? I want to know. If she and Daniel are making these allegations, then why are they not in prison?
Since the sentencing, a lot of people have been up in arms that the Brooks family did not go down for murder. There is also a lot of people that joined a Voices for Vera campaign that are now seeking justice over the Brooks family. The day when Vera's body was found, Cheri actually contacted social services and demanded that Zachary was given full custody over Willadean. Months later, a judge denied that request and Willadean was put up for adoption. For any contact for Zachary, the judge said that he had to prove that he was fit as a parent. The judge ordered 2 supervised visits, however Zachary did not turn up for the second one. He didn't turn up for the second visit because the first visit was cut short to only 15 minutes because Willadean, anytime Zachary got near her, would scream and cry and basically imply that she didn't want Zachary anywhere near her. Willadean was adopted by a loving family. The day after Vera's murder, the police searched the riverbank for evidence. Vera's clothes were found, and when a police investigator picked up her hoodie, a piece of paper fell out from one of the pockets. He unfolded it, and in there was Vera's handwriting, and it was a note from mother to daughter, and it read, "I love you, Willadean. You're a good little baby to us. I'm glad to be your mummy, and I'm glad that I have had you on November the 4th at 4:16 a.m. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, 19 inches long. Mummy loves you." After all parties that were involved in the murder of Vera and they received their small sentences, the note was actually given to Willadean's adoptive family, so that one day, when it is right, Willadean will receive the note from her mother. So that was the case of the killing of Vera Jo Reigle Messersmith. I really and truly hope that I gave it as good of an insight as I possibly could. I researched this for weeks. I went on multiple websites. I watched the documentary about 4 times, which each time it's harder and harder to watch because it's just vile. You really do have a full understanding of the family. And honestly, if you have the time, do go and watch it because there is a lot in there I couldn't bring myself to add into this. When I say about the abuse, there is a lot more that I did not add. I just couldn't write it down and read it out. I just really felt for Vera in this entire story, and the fact that before my friend Chrissy told me about it, I had no idea that this case had ever happened. And before my friend Chrissy had told me about this case, I had no idea about it. And to me, that is incredibly shocking because it is one of the worst cases I've ever read up on. I severely hope that in the future this case is re-investigated and there is justice for Vera. I hope that Willadean has a great life. I'm sure she will. Apparently, when I read, she's been adopted by a really loving family, and I just hope all the best for her. My love and thoughts go to Vera. I don't have the words for what I want to say about her, but this case was truly devastating, tragic, and just really hard to research, honestly. Like I say, the documentary is on YouTube, it is free to watch, but I did feel that the documentary was way more about the Brooks family than it was about Vera, which is why I made this today. So if you made it to the end, as always, thank you so much for being here. This case was tough, but thank you for sticking with me through it. But that is all from me, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you, and bye-bye.